Hello, everyone, and welcome to the November 25th episode of the LGS Pod, the Soccer Shorts companion podcast, where we highlight topics that affect local grassroots soccer culture here in our hometown of San Diego, as well as across the U.S. and around the world. I'm John Cross, founder of Soccer Shorts, and with me tonight, as always, is our co-host Dylan Wilson. Dylan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. It was fun going up to watch the Open Cup qualifying game, even though it was unfortunate that San Diego did not win. So that was a good time, and that's the only soccer thing that happened this week.
Yeah, it was. I had a lot of fun. It was fun going up there to see a match. And I don't know, how many people would you say were there on the sideline?
I would say 50 total. That's
Yeah,
probably a little generous, but I would say like 30, 40 maybe. It was a good crowd.
yeah, it was a decent crowd. It was fairly evenly divided. I was surprised how many. I'm sure it was a lot of family members and friends, but I was surprised how many people were up there rooting for SD Inter as well, as we were up there in Laguna Niguel. And we also met a fellow Open Cup sicko, didn't we? Who drove up from
We
San
did.
Diego,
Also,
and
John.
also John. Yeah, so got to talking with him after the match as well. And who knows? We all talked about it. Maybe we'll be out there to some more SD Inter matches here. I know. I think they're getting close, right, to playoffs right now. So
Yes.
maybe in the spring, or maybe we'll catch some of the ones here at the end. All right, and you said nothing else really soccer-wise, so let's go. I mean, we have a lot to talk about,
I was
certainly from the
making a
news of
joke about the
soccer.
North London Derby mostly, so
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure that's we'll just skip over that part
yeah,
for
that
you.
sounds good.
All right, well, let's do a quick preview of the episode. We are, as of today, 200 days away from the World Cup. 42 teams have made it in. We still have 6 berths to be decided to round out our 48 team pool for this edition coming up for the Men's World Cup in 2026. We'll have those final playoffs for those last 6 positions in March. The draw is coming up real quick. It's next week, Friday, I think it is. But next week and tonight, as our main topic, we're going to try, it's hard sometimes to stay away from the Trump Infantino storylines, which tend to dominate the conversation at the moment, and try to look into some of the more sporting storylines and some of the feel good stories, the teams that qualified, the debutantes, things like that, the things that make us really love this beautiful game, and try to focus on some of those storylines. Some of those we might even develop into more in-depth episodes next spring as we get closer to the World Cup. So that's the big topic we're going to do. We'll, of course, go through some of the week's news because there's always some big things to talk about. But we're going to kick it off tonight with our This Day in Soccer History. And tonight, instead of focusing on San Diego, we're going to focus on men's college soccer and men's college soccer just in general. But on this date, November 25th, 1976, marked the date of the longest soccer match in college soccer history, which gets overshadowed a lot because it happened in the NAIA. And if you just do a quick Google search for longest college soccer match, you get something more recently with UCLA was involved because it's Division One and NCAA. But this NAIA match against Simon Fraser University, which is, I believe, the only Canadian team that plays in the American college system, and Quincy College. It was a semifinal match, and it didn't go 1 or 2 or 3 overtime periods because they didn't use penalty kicks to decide the outcome. You had to have a winner. This went 14
Wow.
overtime periods to decide a winner.
Jesus.
Hours of soccer. In fact, there's such an interesting story for you. This is going to be the focus of our next episode. But as I was doing some prep ahead of time for that episode, I realized that the date of it was actually the date of tonight's show. So we decided to do a little callback to that and a little sneak peek for something we're going to be talking about next week, because I'm sure there's lots of questions that people have about that, and we will answer all of those on our next week's episode. But what do you think about that, Dylan? 14. I can't remember if I have to look again, if it ended in the 14th overtime or they completed 14 overtimes and it ended in the 15th overtime. But
I mean, either way, I'm not exactly a proponent of penalty shootouts, but at some point, like you're
right.
running out of legs, it's shades of Mahout Isner at Wimbledon and like whatever that was, 2011, 12,
Yeah,
13,
yeah.
somewhere in there.
Right. And there was a quote in one of the newspaper articles, and again, we'll share a lot more detail on next week's episode, but where one of the players said, like, people just didn't really care anymore. Somebody was just hoping somebody would score a goal
Yeah,
just
for
to
real.
just to end the thing. But again, there are some interesting storylines behind all that, and we'll touch on the UCLA one as well next week, but we'll dig into a little college soccer history next week because we are getting closer to wrapping up our college soccer tournaments. So let's jump into those just super briefly. We do have the NAIA, both the men's and women's are getting ready for their final 16. They do a central location for their last 16 teams. So that should be coming up in early December. So they've established to get to those 16, and now both on the men's and women's side, they'll go to a central location. On the NCAA side, the men are getting into their Sweet 16, is where they are. So they will be having some matches this weekend, and the women are down to their final 8. So after this weekend, we'll know who the final 4 are leading into next weekend's matches on the women's side. As far as, we have on the men's side, USD was our only local entrant, I believe, and they're already out. They got upset by Grand Canyon University, I believe. And I think the only even California team left in for both the men's and the women's is Stanford. That's it. We have no other representation. We don't have representation in San Diego and very little representation in the entire state of California left in either of these tournaments.
Well, that's unfortunate. Feels like San Diego, yes, but California in general maybe underachieving a little bit there. This should be there is a hotbed of talent here, so clearly
Right.
it's not being tapped into properly.
Yeah, I didn't look at all the results and haven't been following other things, so I haven't been following that. So I'm not really sure all the results, but just at a glance, little disappointing because we usually have some very strong showing on both the men's and the women's side. But to go back to what we talked about in our opening banter, the U.S. Open Cup match we went to was the final qualifying round. So we now know all the teams that are going to be in that first round proper. That was decided this last weekend. So we had 16 teams that, through various qualifications through the amateur leagues, got an automatic berth into that first round of the U.S. Open Cup proper. And then they had the qualifying tournament, and we just finished that this last weekend. So we know the last 16 teams. Congratulations to Laguna United, which was the team that SD Enter faced in this final round. They made it to one of those berths, so now they will make it to the Open Cup proper along with 15 other teams throughout the country. We don't know all the draws and times and dates and everything else, but we do know the 32 teams that are going to participate at least in the first round of the U.S. Open Cup. And we still don't know the full tournament. All that stuff will be decided later as to when the professional teams come in. But we know that first round, we know all the teams. And already I'm looking forward to, even though we don't have anything close, and based on where Laguna United played this last match, I doubt they host a game. Maybe they do in that first round. I don't know. So we may have another year where we don't get any close games for the U.S. Open Cup for us.
Yeah, unfortunately, it does look that way.
Yeah, so we'll follow that and see how that plays out, and I'm sure we'll do some other stories in the early spring as we get closer to the U.S. Open Cup. But in some other kind of tournament news are U.S. extended teams, right? These are teams beyond the, I was going to say normal, that would be bad of me, but beyond the men's national team system and the women's national team. So these are different Paralympic sport teams, the deaf national team, and so forth. But the U.S. deaf women's national team just earned another gold medal, their 5th gold medal, their 8th world title in a 4-0 defeat of Japan over the weekend. They are currently unbeaten, 45 matches, I think, since their inception. 45 matches unbeaten. They are 44 wins, 1 draw.
Wow.
And already that is a fascinating story that I've kind of penciled in for later, hopefully to time it around that they have another tournament getting ready to start and competition. So, but I've already penciled something in so we can dive a little deeper into this team, and it'll be interesting to see how they move forward because a bunch of key players are retiring and coaching staff and everything else. So we'll see if the new version of the U.S. deaf women's national team will be able to keep up the undefeated streak.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't realize they were that dominant. I knew, I know America funds its extended teams better than most nations on Earth. So I'm not surprised to hear that they're dominant, but I didn't realize they were that dominant.
Yeah, it's, going on something you just said, I hope this doesn't, one, I hope we continue to fund, but I hope this doesn't end up being like, I think what we're currently seeing on the women's side is where we had an early leg up on everybody because we funded women's sports. And frankly, we only funded women's sports because, people were forced to fund women's sports. But the benefit of that was we have a lot of women's sports and highly competitive female athletes. And we were able to dominate in sports like soccer internationally early on. And we are still dominant, a strong team. But I would say there's a whole lot more people catching up on the women's side. And I hope we can, as you said, continue to invest in our extended national teams. We don't, just kind of rest on these early victories because clearly we are devoting more resources to these than many, many other countries right now.
And I will say, too, that I have noticed this, and I've also been told this by people from Europe. Something that I think Americans who just live their daily lives in their familiar city in America take for granted, and something America does better than really any other country on earth is disability inclusion. The ADA is like a really landmark piece of legislation that kind of paved the way for anything else like it in the world, and America is a very accessible place, and I just want to shout out America. We do a lot of things wrong, but that is one thing we get right, and long may it continue in our sports.
Yes, and maybe just a cynical reminder that I'm glad we have them, but the only reason they were there is because they were forced into being.
Yes.
Because if left to own devices, people wouldn't have done it.
True.
So
that's true of civil rights as well, though. People had to fight.
Absolutely.
Labor rights.
Right.
The weekend, people had to fight. Those rights were won in blood, and I think a lot of people forget that. So
yeah. So
yes.
Hope we keep all that going. We also had an NWSL final. So we have a lot of our playoffs and things wrapping up here at this time of year. So Gotham defeated Washington Spirit 1-0 on a Rose Lavelle goal there late in the match. We kind of saw it as we were at our Open Cup match, watching it around a phone there. But I didn't go back and watch it. I just read some highlights other than as we were talking and kind of watching it on our phone there. But any thoughts on NWSL final?
I mean, good for Gotham. That's 2 and 3 years now, right? They've gone in just the space of about 3 years from people laughing about the NY/NJ name, which I think is still objectively kind of funny, But now they're, one of the most successful clubs in NWSL history already, just like that. That's kind of one of the things that can happen with a newer league, right? Is it only takes a couple of successful seasons to be one of the most successful clubs. So yeah, shout out to Gotham. Rose Lavelle has always been one of my favorite US WNT players. She is one of those players that, like, if you've got an eye for soccer, the minute you watch her play, you're like, yeah, she's got the sauce. So I was not surprised when it was her name on the score sheet, and that goal was a lovely finish. I'm not sure if the person who set her up was looking for her or not. If they were, that was incredible vision. Either way, hell of a finish from Lavelle, though. And I know that she's kind of maybe on the downside of her prime. I know injuries have started to catch up with her a bit, but she's always just been such a joy to watch.
Yes. Yeah. Always fun watching those dynamic players on the field. That can pull something out of thin air.
Absolutely.
And that wasn't one of those cases, but she showed up in a great spot and just beautifully placed side-footed shot into the bottom corner of the goal. Just well taken from the top of the box.
There are a lot of skills in soccer that some people are very good at. People excel at different things, right? There's pacey players, there's dribbly players, there's passers, there's defenders. Being in the right place at the right time is a skill you really can't teach. And some players just have it and some players don't. And that was an example of Rose Lavelle exhibiting that specific skill set, along with the incredible finish. But
right. One of the things NWSL, now that they're officially in their off season, now the final has been completed, they certainly have some salary cap issues and some, what's going to happen with Trinity Rodman, whether she moves on away from NWSL or she's able to stay on somewhere. But we're going to dig a little deeper in I think 2 weeks here in an episode and looking at professional soccer salaries and things with salary cap in American soccer, because we have some big issues happening right now. Major League Soccer has always kind of been, I think, the focal point for their GAM and TAM and all these other crazy structures they have in salary cap. But NWSL is having some big issues. UPSL is having some big issues. And let's jump into that here for a second, because they had their championship match, which Pittsburgh won in penalty kicks over Tulsa in Tulsa.
You mean USL? Sorry, you said UPSL.
Thank you. Yes, USL championship.
Okay, sure.
But thank you. But I think the game was a little bit overshadowed by a lot of the controversy around the broadcast and certain things that the players did, with all the players coming out wearing a shirt basically saying, hey, let's look at professional standards for players, right? And a better collective bargaining agreement before we start worrying about Pro Rel and Division One and anything else. And there wasn't a proper trophy presentation. And
I was going to ask if you'd seen that the USL players posted on their socials about the championship trophy presentation was canceled after, like, on the fly after seeing those shirts, apparently.
Yeah,
allegedly.
Right. I'm hesitant maybe to go there directly, because if they were trying to do it like within the broadcast window that they had, and they already running it because it went to penalty kicks, because they moved right into, whatever the next thing was on their linear CBS Sports. But the fact that that's even part of the conversation, I'm not saying that didn't happen, but I could see a possibility where maybe that is the wrong interpretation in this moment. But the fact that that even is considered an interpretation, I think highlights the fundamental huge problems that seem to be happening behind the scenes between the USL Players Association and the league, and whether or not they're going to come to an agreement before the end of this current CBA, which ends at the end of December.
I think if we are applying like the standard of a court of law, you're right. There's nothing to like solidly incriminate the USL for the trophy presentation being canceled because of the shirts, right? But I would push back on the idea that the broadcast ending matters at all, because yes, that is something we like to see on the TV, but it's not. The trophy presentation is a thing that existed before broadcast television and is a thing that should persist regardless of broadcast television, because it's not
Yes.
about the TV. It's about the fucking trophy, right? So I while you're correct that, like, in a very literal sense, we can't say one way or another with certainty whether that's why this happened. If I'm reading the tea leaves and I'm, going with my gut, I think that that is probably a very likely accurate assertion by whatever this social media post was.
And it's certainly a bad look for the league, no matter what.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Whether it was intentional or not, when you are in what appears to be a contentious negotiation with your players union, like this just gives fuel to the fire anyway, and is going to make it a little harder to come to some kind of an agreement. I mean, no matter what it was poor by the league. It was
Yeah, agreed.
the announcers didn't talk about it at all. The broadcasts clearly shied away from showing the stuff that they had, all the placards that were being held by fans. There were a lot of, like, they danced around the issue clearly, and it is a huge issue. I mean, it is
that's
probably the fundamental issue of this league being successful moving forward.
That's something too that arises out of the issue of the franchise model, because that can only happen, right, in a system where it's the league first, not clubs first. And I want to say too, and I don't think I've really seen anybody say this, and I don't mean to like say to provide that context in the sense of like, oh, look at me being a hipster or whatever. But I recall our most dedicated fans might recall there was a brief period during our last season of Loyal where we did the Kicking It with the Locals, I think it was called, series with Sal and Marklin, where we had intended to kind of, touch base with the supporters groups of opposing teams. And that kind of fell by the wayside because of schedules. And then once it was announced Loyal was folding, all that podcast stuff kind of just kind of anyway. One of the supporters groups we did actually get to talk to was the head of, I think it was something 93. I don't remember. I'm sorry to the Tulsa fans. I don't recall the exact name of the supporters group. I recall the number 93 though. Maybe I'm whatever. That's not important. We had an interview with the head of the Tulsa supporters groups, and he was a delightful guy and had some really interesting things to say about the city of Tulsa, writ large, but also FC Tulsa and the fans' journey to having a club and their relationship with the club. And I thought it was super interesting. And by all accounts, they nearly sold out that nearly 10,000 seat stadium. They did sell out. So that's almost 10,000 people came to this game. I'm not going to pretend it was a super exciting game because it wasn't. I didn't get to watch it. That's a whole other thing.
I did. I watched the whole thing, and it was not the best game.
But tonight,
great atmosphere.
And I'm sure, well, and exactly, those fans, and I'm sure they would have rather see Tulsa win. But those fans, this was the first time Tulsa had ever hosted a final. Oklahoma is not a place you think of when you think of American soccer, right? So, like, this was a chance for the USL to, like, embrace one of their local markets that doesn't get a lot of love on the national scale. And so I understand that whatever happened probably had nothing to do with Tulsa, but I feel bad for the Tulsa fans because it feels like their hosting of a final experience, even though I'm sure they would have rather their team won, was tarnished by, like, the league being petty about this very real grievance that the players of both clubs, so the Tulsa players too, we're in support of. And so I feel a little bad for the Tulsa fans just because I think they got cheated a little bit. And also, I'm sure it sucks to host a final and your team not win. I can't say Loyal ever had that privilege, but so my heart goes out to them. I think they got screwed on kind of all fronts there.
Yeah, I just a quick side note that I don't think Tulsa, I mean, we've had Tulsa Athletic have some runs in the Open Cup, and Tulsa has a rich soccer history. We do have the Tulsa Roughnecks from the old NASL, who I believe, if I remember correctly, actually did make it to a final, if not won a final at some point. Don't know if it was played in Tulsa, but have to go back and look at that. But they have had a long, deep history of soccer. And again, I think this is another one of those things where, I don't think Tulsa would ever be in the conversation for Major League Soccer because the
No.
market is not big enough.
Right.
But I like that we can have teams in whatever league, and hopefully USL and the Players Union figure things out. They get Division One going, and we get to have teams all over the country that can compete on merit. And a place like Tulsa can have a first division championship team because they're in a league that welcomes a merit-based competition as opposed to a market. Like,
Sure.
I want to be in a market with the proper customers attitude.
Sure. And to be clear, if by some chance somebody in Tulsa or from Tulsa is watching this, I'm not meaning to suggest Tulsa doesn't have the soccer history or anything to warrant that sort of coverage, but I'm saying this was a chance for the USL to really lean into that, right? This is a local culture that is something the USL ostensibly lives and dies on, right? Is the local soccer culture. And here you have a city in a place people don't tend to associate with soccer with a rich soccer history. And instead of leaning into that, they got all petty about these very real labor grievances. So it's, anyway, we're going way deeper on this than I think we intended, but
we're actually going to talk more about this in a couple of weeks.
Well, fair enough.
In some better context, but
put a bow on it. It's a shame that this otherwise, big event, or should be big event in American soccer, was kind of tarnished by this pettiness by the league. I want to be very clear. I'm not putting any onus of the tarnishing of this event on the players, because I think they were well within their rights to make the statement they did. I think it was a very uninflammatory way to make that statement. It was their time to shine. They're saying what they want to say. They got on with the game. And I think it's a real indictment of the franchise model, because it allows the league to exert this sort of control that you don't see in leagues where it's just independent clubs competing for, like you said, the merit-based success.
Yeah. I agree. And like you said, we'll put a bow in that for now, and we'll revisit it in more detail in a couple of weeks, and hopefully have some additional information here in a couple of weeks.
I'm sure some tea is going to come out, right? Like, it's got to.
Yes. Yeah. So hopefully we'll have that to talk about. But I want to switch gears to Canada, the Canadian Premier League. Now, we did our episode on the structure of Canadian soccer. We just announced on one of our episodes very recently about the expansion into Montreal. And then on the heels of that, this week, between our last episode and this episode, it was announced that Valor FC, which is based out of Winnipeg, are suspending operations. They're not folding, but who knows what that means. For right now, they're just suspending operations. And I think, again, this goes to show the precarious nature of trying to have a first division league without a lot to support underneath it, because they don't have a second division at all. They're trying to work towards that, and they're trying to build out their third division. And you just have this big gap. And, we're seeing it in the women's side in Australia, the same thing, of teams struggling to compete and stay at this first division level when you just don't have the base of the pyramid underneath it to really help support, with players being able to come in, with coaches being able to come in, with all the fans even just watching. So disappointing to see for Canada that they're losing a team. I don't know anything else other than they have lost a team. So I don't know if it was poorly run, well run, if this is a symptom or it's a symptom of larger structural problems underneath in the Canadian Premier League, or it's a one-off. But as you're growing, never good to see a team that seemed to, out of the blue, announce they're suspending operations.
Yeah, that is too bad to hear. We had a member of the locals who was, I can't quite remember his
Calgary's,
name.
Right?
Yeah, it was
I mean, that
Calgary.
was
Okay, that's who I was thinking of because I was trying to think, was Valor his club? I don't recall, but no, it was Calgary. You're right. Now that I say it out loud, I can't remember their name. I want to say Callum, but I don't think that was right. Anyway, shout out to that person if you if you're watching this and you know who you are. But okay, so that wasn't our locals friends club, but that is too bad. And like you said, clubs folding is not a thing that only happens in the closed league system, but it's a thing that happens far more frequently in the closed league system. So it's too bad to hear.
yeah.
I feel bad for those fans having been through that, with Loyal and also with the Oakland A's moving. It was a real 1-2 punch for me. So I can really empathize with those fans, and it's hard. And I hope that they at least remember the good times, if nothing else.
Yeah. Hopefully it is just a suspending operations
Sure.
and they'll be able to get back
It's
in
never,
maybe in a year.
We talked about NCFC the other week, though. It's
Right.
It's never a great sign.
No, never. All right. In our final news, we'll keep it local and give huge shout out to SDFC and especially the supporters, SD Fronteras, for SDFC's 1-0 victory over, I almost said Vancouver, that's next week, 1-0 victory over Minnesota in their Western Conference semifinals, which was last night for when we are recording this here on a Tuesday. Dylan, did you get to watch the game at all? I think it is the first game this year that I've watched all the way through.
Well, I was under the impression the removal of the MLS Season Pass paywall was happening right away, but that didn't seem to be the case. Am I correct in understanding that?
Well, it did in the sense that if you're an Apple TV subscriber.
Well, see, that's the thing is I actually got set up earlier that day. My dad subscribes to Apple TV and got me set up on his account, and I still wasn't able to watch the game without paying extra. So maybe that was like a geolocating tag sort of deal. However, I did, through a friend who, for their own protection shall remain nameless, find a totally legit, totally legal streaming site where I was able to watch most of the game until it crashed out around the 88th minute. So I did see the goal.
You did see the goal.
Yeah. And, I don't remember where I said this, but I was talking to some folks today. I wish I cared about SDFC. I don't, though. And the truth is the opposite of love is not hate, right? It's apathy. And I just don't have any strong feelings one way or the other towards SDFC. And I wish that weren't the case, but it is. However, I'm very glad to see them win. And I think I've talked about this on the show before, because the people that I grew to love through Loyal, there are some of them who do care a lot about SDFC, right? And they deserve the best club possible. Even if I don't love what has become of San Diego soccer, they still deserve the best, even if I don't agree with it. And so I'm very happy to see SDFC continue to go as far as they can. I'm really hoping they win. I'm really hoping that New York somehow beats Miami in Miami and San Diego gets to host the final. I think that would be incredible. Truth be told, I have a friend who works at the club and told me he could get me tickets to the Western Conference final. And I told him, like, look, if you can't find somebody to take them, which I don't believe would happen, like, fine, right, I'll take them. But give them to somebody who is dying to be there, somebody who can't afford to bring their kid or whatever. Because I love soccer, but like I said, I'm nothing San Diego FC. I don't love them. I don't hate them. I nothing them. But I'm so happy for all the people, like I said, that I've grown to love through my kind of connections in the San Diego soccer space. I know they're all ecstatic and shit, man. I mean, they've done. I talked about how first year MLS clubs tend to do very well in the regular season and then falter, in the postseason. And they've already gotten far enough that you can't levy that complaint at them. So it's a free hit from here. Obviously at home, you hope to win, but as a first year club with a guy like Dreyer coming out of relatively nowhere. Yeah. I mean, I know he's a DP, but I think anybody telling you they saw this coming is lying. It's just go out and have fun. The game against Minnesota was frustrating. I know I saw a lot of people who are probably newer to soccer complaining about the way Minnesota approached that game, but you know what? That's soccer for you. I totally like nothing against Minnesota's approach. It was a boring as shit game though, for the most part. But again, great finish from Dryer, a little bit of magic. That's what you need. So I'm rambling at this point, but I'm really mostly just happy for the people in that supporters section because I know a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and I know you know this too, has gone into what's happened there. So.
Yeah, agree with you completely. Super happy for the supporters. I hope the run continues. And if you're interested in watching, I mean, attending, good luck getting a ticket. But if you're interested in watching, I believe the game is this Saturday at 6 o'clock against Vancouver. And certainly, if you listen to any of the pundits out there, Vancouver is highly rated in this one. I think just because they beat LAFC and people found that to be a surprise. So
because LA was really hot.
Sure. Yeah.
Ever since Sun has arrived, LA has really been one of the best teams in the league. But Vancouver did finish second in the Western Conference, and Thomas Muller is an excellent footballer. He's one of the few players that can genuinely say a new role in football was created and described for them specifically. Not a lot of players can say that. The Raumdeuter. So
yeah. All right. Well, I think that wrapped up our kind of looking back and recapping the news of the week. So let's get into our main topic and trying to look at some of the storylines coming up for the 2026 World Cup. As we said in the opening, we are 200 days away as of today until the World Cup. Up until maybe a week ago when we finished the bulk of qualifying for this current World Cup cycle, Trump and Infantino probably have dominated the news, right? We have things like this inaugural Peace Prize that's going to be awarded at the draw coming up. We have all the immigration issues that we're seeing, even the worry of whether people are going to show up or not that we now have between FIFA, the White House, and different groups. We have these former football legends that are promoting the safe World Cup in their home countries to encourage people to make sure they buy tickets and come. And then on the heels, we have countries that have qualified, like Haiti and I can't remember the other country right now, but whose citizens are on the banned travel list through this Trump administration.
Well, probably.
And when asked this last week, Rubio said, no, there's going to be no exceptions for the World Cup. Right. And through all of this, I found out that we have a congressional soccer caucus, which I had no idea that was even a thing ever.
Wait, I didn't know that either. Tell me that it isn't consisting of the worst absolute, like fucking Chuck Roy and not Marco Rubio anymore, but like your Chuck Grassley's, like your dinosaurs. I'm sure
I can't tell you that.
Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you that it's not.
It probably is.
I didn't look at the full makeup of it, but I saw a couple of names and was just like, oh, my goodness, just, moved on. But also, all these other stories have been dominating most of the news. And then this week we have, I saw that Congress is actually investigating FIFA's free use of the Kennedy Center. They signed a contract for $0 to use it. So Congress is investigating that. And then today, hear that Cristiano Ronaldo magically, after getting his red card for violent conduct in the last qualifying match, or I guess second to last qualifying match. So he missed the final one. He's supposed to miss two more, which would be the first two games of the World Cup proper. And somehow between the time he gets the World Cup and he goes and visits the White House with Trump and Infantino, all of a sudden a week later, those last two suspensions have been rescinded, and magically Ronaldo gets to play all the World Cup. He doesn't suffer a ban coming into it, which is absolutely unheard of. We have had not a lot of times, but there is lots of precedents of people getting a red card somewhere and then missing an opening match or something happening at the World Cup itself. If if they were to make it on the team. So we certainly have those kinds of issues. And I'm going to give you a chance to jump in and comment about any of those. And then once we do that, we're going to try to put that aside and get to the more sporting stories and the stuff that really makes us fall in love with this game, and why we call it the beautiful game. So we'll try to get this out of our system now, and then we'll move on.
I did see that Ronaldo was not going to be suspended because of that red card. I didn't realize it was because of the politicking, but that's not surprising. I mean, he showed up at Mar-a-Lago recently, didn't he, Ronaldo? I thought he couldn't come to the U.S. because he had like an active warrant for rape or something like that.
I don't remember all the details, but I do remember something along those lines, and it was one of the reasons.
As if the Trump administration wouldn't just make that go away anyway. But
I mean,
anyway, yeah, I mean, it's all just so nakedly gross, and like Ronaldo is gross. I respect his commitment to the game and his commitment to his athleticism and like what an impressive career on the field he's had, but he is like just such a garbage human being in every way, shape, and form. And I'm not just talking about like the rape stuff. He's like obsessed with himself. Even still, if people ask him like about who's, him versus Messi, he's still like having an ego trip at like 41 years old. And I'm sorry, that's pathetic. Anyway, it's not about Ronaldo. It is largely just kind of disgusting. And it has made me less excited for the World Cup, which we've talked about. And I think I'm actually kind of getting ahead of you on the segue here. There are some very interesting, like on the field storylines, national team wise, that have kind of reinvigorated my excitement a little bit for the World Cup. I did want to say though, real quick, there actually is a government.gov website for the House, or not even House, the Congressional Soccer Caucus.
Okay.
And I don't recognize a lot of these people, but it does range all the way from Dan fucking Crenshaw, the guy with the eye patch, who fuck that guy, to my girl Pramila Jayapal, who is the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and representative from Seattle. So it is a bipartisan issue, I guess.
All right. Yeah, with our current federal government, I just have steered away. I was just surprised to see that there was a congressional soccer.
There's actually a lot of people
caucus
in it. It's quite a list here. I was surprised to see it had such a robust website.
Well, I might have to check that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's I don't want to go through, it would take too long, all the teams that have qualified and everything else. We know 42 teams have qualified, and there were some pretty interesting stories there. But I think maybe let's start with we have 6 spots that are still open. 4 of those are going to go to European teams. 2 are going to go to what they call the FIFA playoff tournaments, but that's kind of everybody else outside of FIFA that they've grouped together. Do you have any thoughts or anything interesting, whether it's the format or of these teams that may or may not make it in, or maybe ones that we expected to be in and that are not in yet? But any thoughts about like these last 6 might be?
Yeah, I'm not crazy about the way UEFA is doing it for their last 2 slots. They have 8 teams competing for those 2 slots or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
I preferred in the old system where confederations would have half a slot, quote unquote, right? And what that meant was they'd have a home and home leg against a team from another confederation that has half a slot, right? So you'd see things like New Zealand and Peru playing a home and home, which I recognize like logistically is pretty impractical, but from the perspective of the neutral, that is what the World Cup is all about. Like having to go from fucking the altitude of Lima all the way across the Pacific Ocean to Auckland. Like that is what it's all about. So I don't love that it's all these kind of more internal playoff systems. I preferred the cross-continental playoffs.
I did as well. I like that, and you knew knew who you were going to face. But we do a new pool and a draw, which they've done already, so we know what the matchups are going to be. And you could go look at those. And I mean, anybody go online, go to the FIFA website, and you'll see that. And we have. I think you look at, maybe I'll just take Europe for right now. Look at a team like Ireland that had the clutch victory against, was it Hungary that they were
Yes, it was. It was in
facing?
Budapest as well.
Yeah, and just to make it to these playoffs, right? Because they're in the same group, I believe, with Portugal, and Portugal had already pretty easily won the group. But to get in here and to get that second opportunity, I think I was looking ahead to see, because Scotland made it in already, and England have made it in. Scotland made it in proper on the last day, but you have, I think, Wales, Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland all, in these playoffs. And I was wondering if they all could make it. Like, would there be a way? And I don't think there was when I looked at the playoff format. Like, someone's going to meet somewhere and knock themselves out. But I was trying to think back, and this is one of the things we'll dive into a little deeper as we get closer to the World Cup. But I couldn't remember if there was ever a time when, say, all of the UK, so Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, all were in the same World Cup. So I don't know if you know that. I mean, I'd have to look it up, but I don't think they ever have been. And I was trying to see, like, oh, could that be another one of these interesting firsts for this particular World Cup?
No, I don't believe they have.
Yeah, well, let's.
No, I don't think so.
So those, I mean, obviously we're going to have some interesting storylines as we approach. One of the things here, if we just take it to CONCACAF for these playoffs, is, Jamaica. I think if you would have looked back at who was going to qualify from CONCACAF, I mean, Panama made it. I don't think that's a huge surprise that Panama got one of the three berths. But the other two, Haiti and Curacao, I don't think anybody really had that on their radar. Like, maybe they could challenge, but I don't think anybody really thought either one of those were likely to get the automatic berths. So those are some cool stories of teams from CONCACAF that made it in. Again, I think we'll probably do some deeper profiles on some of the CONCACAF teams as we get a little closer, because I think Haiti's an interesting story. One, I think the last time they were in the World Cup was 74, if I remember correctly. So an interesting story of how they got in that time, but also this time around, with all the, strife, to put it mildly, going on in Haiti, and having to play all their games in, I can't remember where they played, Curacao or Suriname. They played in one of those places where they played their, kind of became their home field area. But to play all their World Cup matches away and still win their group to make it as an automatic qualifier, I think is a fantastic story. And Curacao, the new smallest country.
I was going to say by a significant margin, by like over 50%, or they're less than 50% of the previous smallest, which was Iceland at like 340-ish thousand. So
right, so they're like 150,000 ish, somewhere around there.
I would wager, and I could probably look this up, and I will after I say it, but I'm going to go out on a limb and just say it. I would be willing to wager there's a larger diaspora around the world of people who identify as having Curacao heritage than there are people in Curacao currently.
And there's, I think, interesting stories with how these teams came together with Curacao and Suriname, both who are in the playoffs here. So again, I think those are some things worth diving into.
Sorry, I just want to say, as of the most recent census, there's about just over 150,000 people in Curacao and just under 150,000 Curaçaoans in the Netherlands alone. So it probably is the diaspora bigger than the current population.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's an interesting story. I think Jamaica is where their head coach Steve McLaren like resigned when he didn't automatically qualify, but yet they still have playoffs that they have to go into, so they're going to have to get a new coach and do that coming into the playoffs. I thought that was it. It seemed like he made the decision to step down, not from the FA. So I don't know the full story there, but that's going to be interesting with the new coach going in and seeing if somebody new can come salvage these last I guess it'll be last two games, because Jamaica will have to win a match to then go and play. I don't know if it's New Caledonia. I forget who the next person is that kind of has a bye. So Jamaica will have to play a match and then have to get to that second one. So Jamaica has to win two matches basically to make it into the World Cup. But again, some interesting local, CONCACAF local stories we have, and how many extra berths could we get? Could we get two more? Well, I think that's what we could get, is two more berths into the World Cup. So there are three host countries, our three automatics, and however many more make it through the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see how that shapes up in March.
Absolutely. And, we talked about before how this expanded World Cup, despite the obvious cash grab nature of it, it has afforded these opportunities. And I do think they did a good job allocating the extra slots so that these countries and these confederations do have a better chance. And to answer your earlier question, unfortunately, not all of the British Isles countries, yes, I'm sorry, my Irish folks, I am including you in that. Wales and Northern Ireland are in the same path bracket, so they could.
Yeah, that's what I thought. They were in the same bracket. Somebody was in the same bracket, so you couldn't get all four of the UK countries,
correct,
to actually make it in. But it's been a while. Ireland hasn't made it in yet, but it's been a while since Ireland has made it to a World Cup. It's been a while for Scotland. Good to see them, because I love the Tartan Army. They're just a lot of fun. Just one of those supporter groups that comes. It's just a lot of fun. Like a lot of countries that we see. Japan is great. Brazilians are always great, and the Tartan Army is great. When they're coming in and travel strong. So, traveling is a whole other question, right? We're trying to stay away from that in this conversation, but for the people who choose to go to this World Cup and participate, I think that's that's part of what makes the World Cup special, is all the groups that come in. And I was pleased to see somewhere I caught a little blurb that FIFA is holding out, and there was no idea how big this block of tickets were, but a block of tickets for supporters from the home countries, so they could be able to sit together, because it sounded like that wasn't going to happen at all. But there is going to be a block kind of reserved for fans from the home country, and they are not going to be subjected to the dynamic pricing. They're, and sold, I guess, through the federation. I don't know all the details, but there was something there which you have to have. If you get rid of that, you get rid of one of the fundamental appeals of the World Cup. It is what's happening on the field, yes, but it's also what's happening in the stadium and around the stadium when you go to a match day. I have only been to one World Cup, and it was the last time it was in the United States in '94. And I saw Sweden and Romania in Palo Alto, at Stanford. And I'll call it a circus in a loving way, but just what was happening pre-match and outside and going on was just absolutely incredible. And if we deny people entry, or people choose not to come because they're afraid, like we are going to lose a significant piece of what makes the World Cup special.
I mean, I think we may have already crossed the point where we're going to lose a significant chunk of that
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of people who, between the prices of the tickets and the potential to be disappeared, literally, are just making the calculus that it's not worth it. And that's wild that this will be the second World Cup of this decade. The first one was held in Qatar, and more people are making the decision to not come to this one because of political reasons. Just sit with that for a
Not
second.
surprising. Yeah.
Yeah. No, not
Well,
surprising. But if you told me that 10 years ago, I'd have told you you're crazy. That's ridiculous. And so it's an indictment of where American society is at, I think.
Well, I mean, would you ever have thought that, based on the little piece I was talking about earlier about former football legends doing ads in their home countries saying, yes, you can come to the United States for this World Cup? There's not really, I mean, they might be targeting Canada and Mexico as well, but this article that I read seemed like it was specifically targeting the United States. Like, yes, buy your tickets, come to the United States. It'll be a good tournament. It's safe. I never would have thought in my life that the US would be making videos like that.
Well, and it's one of those
Qatar,
things.
I could see that. Russia,
Yeah,
I could see that. I never thought that would happen. Like, have we ever, prior to what's happening, maybe each time Trump was in office, did we ever have trouble for people coming to visit the United States?
No.
It's never an issue, right?
Tourism was a big part of our economy because we rightfully welcomed people from all over the world, regardless of where they were coming from. If they wanted to come see America, they could come see America. That's one of the things that makes America great. Not to co-opt that term. Whoa. But yeah,
be careful there.
Yeah, right. Sorry. I lost my train of thought there, but it's one of those things where making those ads even is like suspect in and of itself. It's like it's funny. This is actually the second time I'm making a joke today in this exact vein because this is how ridiculous the world has gotten. My "it's safe to come here" statement has a lot of people asking questions already answered by my "it's safe to come here" statement. And it's
exactly.
Like it that you have to put that out is like pretty damning in and of itself.
Yeah, it's we'll see. I hope, again, I'm not planning on being there, but selfishly for the people who do go, I do enjoy, I mean, the spectacle and the atmosphere that the traveling fans, I mean, the real traveling fans of those teams, not the wealthy people who can afford to buy a rich ticket and sit, in right on midfield, their field level or something. But that really helps bring the atmosphere to the matches. So I really hope that does continue and it just doesn't become like the Super Bowl. Like the Super Bowl is just filled with people who support each of the teams, but Super Bowl is just very corporate and sterile.
Yeah, not really even though.
There are people who are there for the event, not for their team.
Shockingly small ticket allocations to each club for the Super Bowl. I'm talking like 5,000 each. It's like ridiculous.
Yeah. It could be that for this World Cup, who knows? That's remains to be seen, but there is a plan to allocate something. So I'll be curious to see what that amount actually is. Another thing I'm going to be curious to find out more information about is this pathway strategy from US Soccer. So last time we had a World Cup, there was a big plan that was put into place that once we got all the revenue, the proceeds, the profits, basically from the World Cup, how that was going to be reinvested in soccer across the US, which, part of that was that Project 2010. And then, that doesn't work that way anymore. All the money stays with FIFA. So US Soccer has announced this pathway strategy for how they're going to a little bit Project 2010 like of strengthen pathways of player development to help increase their national teams, both the men's and women's side.
Well,
But
I, for
using
one,
our structure and improving our structure. And I'm curious, what does that mean to improve our structure to offer better development pathways? They're going to be releasing more information later, but I'll be interested to see if that comes out before or after the World Cup and what that actually shapes up to be.
I, for one, am looking forward to the Kushner Development Center. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're supposed to remain separate, right? That's one of FIFA's like core tenets of the
Right.
national FAs. They're supposed to be independent of politics in that country. I guarantee Infantino would roll over that rule for Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
So
But
they will find a way to funnel that money into his family's coffers. I can almost guarantee that.
yeah, we'll see with that pathway strategy. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying about that. I mean, that's already part of that investigation by Congress right now, looking at why in the world is the Kennedy Center being rented out. You know, then there's no use fee for renting it. FIFA can certainly afford it. So why was the contract $0 for every day? And they have possession of it right now. They took possession of the Kennedy Center Monday maybe, and they're going to have it all the way through the 12th, a week after they do the draw. So I'm sure there's a lot of setup that needs to go into it and a lot of takedown, but they have the facility. And this is something new I learned. I've always heard about the Kennedy Center, and I see things at the Kennedy Center. I didn't realize it was a huge complex of buildings. So they have most of the Kennedy Center. They're using something for media, they're using something for the awards, they're using something to host dignitaries. Like they're having an overflow place in a different theater. But they have pretty much the entire campus that they're using and to get everything prepped for this World Cup draw. And again, I understand there's prep that goes into it, but as Congress is asking, why is it being rented for free? FIFA says there's some kind of donation that they're making. People are like, okay, well, why are you donating? Why aren't you just renting the facility? Everybody rents the facility when they use it. There's a facility fee. So there's, to say there's something fishy going on is probably an understatement because we've seen everything else happen. But I was interested to see that Congress is already investigating that. In fact, I think they're supposed to be having hearings the day before the draw.
I mean, I'm sure nothing will come of it, though, unfortunately, because Congress has largely abdicated their duty. But that is not what our podcast is about.
Yeah. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, as you know, we both are, I don't know, mixed feelings, I would say, is safe to say about this upcoming World Cup, because certainly the purity of the sport, the matches, the fans, the atmosphere are all huge draws for this big world event, something that kind of connects all of us together in soccer. Contrasted with the big corporate, big money thing that it's become over time and changed and what's happening in this country, there's certainly, mixed feelings, but I've heard some people offer this up that, maybe even right now, like the World Cup is kind of whatever now because we've seen it be in Russia and Qatar and now the United States and then Saudi Arabia. It's like quite the string of poor choices, maybe. So are qualification or the whole qualification process, is that actually more exciting? Like just getting to the show of the World Cup than the actual World Cup itself? Or are we still going to find the World Cup exciting?
That's a good question. I don't know if I'd say more exciting than the World Cup. I mean, it's the World Cup. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be exciting, even if we have our own kind of objections to the way it's being run and the politics surrounding it. I will say, though, it has made the qualification process more interesting. whether that's because of the wider variety of spots, which means the wider variety of clubs that will make it, or just because, like you said, it kind of dampens the actual finals. It has made the qualifying process more interesting in and of itself, even if not more interesting than the tournament itself, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, we'll have to wait to see how this 48 team tournament actually plays out. But it's, you know, we just had a 48 team tournament with the under 17 World Cup. And I keep seeing, like, I think maybe they finished the semifinals and are getting ready for the finals. But I feel like the US made it to the knockout stage. They got knocked out and the tournament's still going on. It just seems to be going on forever. So I hope I don't have that feeling, with the World Cup itself. But that kind of leads me to my next question. With a 48 team World Cup, great for qualification and great for these new teams that have never made it before get a chance to be part of the World Cup. And we're going to have, if I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, we're doing these 4-team groups and then we're going into a knockout round of 32, I believe. So we're only knocking out 16 teams. So
we're knocking out the 16 teams we added. Yes.
Yeah. And then we're getting to a 32 knockout, and so we get an extra knockout round along the way, but so many teams out of those 4-team groups are going to make it. I loved, like, even when they first went to the 32 teams, I wondered about it because only 2 teams would qualify out of the group. And when we had 24, which was, really when I more started paying attention to World Cup moving through, you always had the 2 winners, but there was wild card third place teams that could make it. And I wasn't sure if I'd like the 32 team World Cup, but once we started with the 32 team World Cup, that last day of group play has always been thrilling. Like, there's so many options and combinations that usually end up happening in a lot of groups, not every group, but a lot of the groups. And then the games are being played at the same time. I think we've had just some dramatic final group stage days. And I find the group stage being one of my most enjoyable. And I'm wondering, with a 48 team World Cup, clearly it's going to change the group stage, but we'll see how it plays out. But I'm afraid we're going to lose that. So now my question to follow up with this is, would we be better off? I know we briefly explored this in another podcast. Rather than going 48 teams, or even as some people suggesting for next year or next time around to go to 64 teams, can we just do 2 tournaments of 32 teams, the World Cup proper and a little World Cup, a Mundialito, right? Something that, like, we see in a lot of places now. Like, okay, you made it to the World Cup proper, but even if we look right now, there are so many strong nations that would not have made the top 32 teams, and other teams would get a chance to play the Italys of the world, the Swedens of the world, and I think still could be an interesting tournament and give more people a shot at having a worldwide tournament structure, and maybe help them develop to be one of those first 32 teams. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not crazy about the idea of like a Europa League World Cup. And I think you'd have a lot of issues getting a lot of the world on board with that. I do think the 48 number is a little silly. Really, any tournament format that involves wildcard teams, I think, is kind of inherently flawed. I thought 32 was a really nice number because it evenly divides down to 2, right?
Yeah.
And I'm obviously biased because 2006 was really the first World Cup I paid a lot of attention to. And I think 2002 was the first one at 32 teams, but still it was, my life has been the 32 team World Cup. That said, I'd honestly rather they just go to 64, which, like, at that point you're getting countries that maybe don't really deserve to be in the World Cup finals qualifying. But it's a cleaner number, a cleaner tournament, in my opinion. But But yeah, I think at the end of the day, like you can only expand the World Cup so far. Like there's only like 200 something UN recognized nations and like a handful more FIFA recognized nations. Like you can't just expand this like to infinity, because then it's just the qualifying process, right? So I don't know. I kind of wish they just stuck with 32, but if we're gonna expand, I'd rather they go to 64 than do this kind of wild card 48 nonsense.
Well, I agree. 32, I think, is the best. They're clearly, we know they're not going to stay. They're going to expand. I mean,
Yeah.
48 was the first. So I don't know. If you went to 64, how would you run the tournament? I mean, you could run like March Madness. Well, I know we've even changed that now with play-in games, but you could just straight up knockout tournament. But a straight up knockout tournament is, with the seeding, then you're going to get probably a Curacao against Germany, and
Yeah, no, I think you'd still do groups. It'd just be 16 groups of 4 instead of 8 groups of 4. And then you have around the 32, around to 16. Like you're just adding an extra layer to the already existing format.
Yeah, I guess with 48 you are. But I think you'd have to, like, right now they try to make sure no games overlap until that last day of the group stage. And then, within the groups, those games overlap. So they try to make it so you could see every match. I think if you went to 64 teams, you couldn't do that, because otherwise then, because you're only doing 3, maybe 4 games a day, and now you're going to drag the tournament out, even though you're not really adding any more rounds relative to 48, but you're going to increase the tournament to like 6 or 7 weeks just to get all your games in.
I mean, I don't care. I love the World Cup. That's fine with me. Like, shit, I don't know.
Yeah, but in terms of, we talk about players and being able to have a break between seasons, and like 7, I can't even imagine a potential 6 to 7 week tournament that then really drags as you get to the final,
Sure.
8 teams. And there's certainly ways you could put it together, but I don't know. I like 32, but I get it for other countries. If you want the opportunity, I like the idea of as you put it, a Europa League for the World Cup. I saw someone offer up something where you start with 64, you seed everybody. So whatever you're, for the FIFA rankings, top seed plays the lowest seed. And then you move into 2 groups of 32. But I don't know how you then, like, I get that. Then you almost have like a winner's bracket, loser's bracket, and you kind of play. And I think in theirs, you have the 2 finalists play against each other. But how do you logistically set that up if you don't even know what your groups are coming in? I mean, I guess you could kind of map it out. The winner of this game is going to take this position in this group, but that just seems also logistically difficult to put together.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think 32 is really the number, and there's no good way to solve a larger tournament, because at that point it's just a bit of a cluster.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our main topic here of looking at some of the storylines for this next World Cup. As we said, we'll look to go a little deeper in some of these stories, like Haiti and Curacao, especially the teams from our region, as we get a little closer to the World Cup. So sometime next spring, probably. Dylan, as we kind of wrap up everything for the show, as we usually do you have any soccer plans for this upcoming week?
I mean, yeah, Champions League tomorrow. Don't think that's going to go great, but yeah, I always, back in the days when I paid more attention to the Europa League, I always really enjoyed the Thanksgiving morning kind of European football. So I'll probably tune into that, kind of flip back and forth between my American football and my European football Thanksgiving morning, and then whatever the Premier League's got on deck this weekend. I haven't looked ahead.
Yeah, and other than that, it is Thanksgiving week. Got any special plans with family or anything?
No, my parents always host, so we'll be heading over there. It's used to be a family and friends affair, but since we moved down to San Diego, it's been more my parents host and kind of just have my brother and I invite any of our friends who might not have a place to go. So
That's nice.
yeah, it has been fun. It's been an interesting, array of people over the years. So
Yeah, we changed, I don't know, more than a decade ago because no one here loves turkey for one. No one likes the cooking. Like,
yes,
all the work and the prep. And it was as kids got older and other relatives and family members, because we host a lot of things. But as we had, just people's plans start changing, as life start changing. And it was harder to get people together anyway. And we just stopped doing Thanksgiving dinner and we now do Thanksgiving breakfast. And we don't always do it on
fun.
Thanksgiving, but we do like a brunch. And then that way, even if it happens on Thanksgiving, usually it's easy. People can get 2 meals out of the day. They can
totally.
and usually you're not in conflict with anybody because everybody else's stuff is later in the afternoon.
Right.
So, and it's super casual, and super easy, right? We do a big old spread, but it's nice. And like your family does, especially with our kids, if they have friends or want to bring people over, which we're going to have some brand new people again this year. I think every year we have brand new people that show up somewhere along the way.
Nice.
So yeah, it'll be a good Thanksgiving. And then we're not even doing it on Thanksgiving this year. We're doing it on Friday. So we're not held to the actual day either. We started changing that a while back as well. So we're flexible. It's really nice as teachers when you're in school districts that have the whole week off. It gives you tremendous flexibility when other people have, maybe have to work the first 3 days of the week before they get the last 4 days off. So that was always to our advantage.
Nice. That's fun that you guys kind of pivoted on the basis that you're not big fans of turkey. I am not a big fan of turkey, but my mom loves to cook the turkey. And my parents both like the turkey and, all the things that go with it. So we always do the traditional, and that's fine. It's a once a year thing for me. But I've got one of my good friends, his family also doesn't really care for turkey. And so when we were probably in like middle school, they switched to surf and turf on Thanksgiving. And every year I lobby my parents and they haven't bid on that yet. So
even before we switched to breakfast, we were changing up the dinner stuff. And I think it happened one time. Thanksgiving plans got totally messed up, and we just went to taco shop. We're like we all love Mexican food. Why don't we do, And we've done all kinds of different things for dinners, and then we just switched to a breakfast because it was easier anyway. It was easier to get people together.
You can even do turkey sausage and call it a Thanksgiving
breakfast.
There you go. It's healthier anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dylan, I think that wraps up another episode for us on the LGS Pod. For any of our listeners or viewers out there, we'd like to hear your favorite storylines for this next World Cup. Drop us a note. You can leave us a comment here on our YouTube channel. You can reach us at Blue Sky, at soccershorts.bigpinedigital.com. If you're listening to us on one of the podcast feeds or podcast apps, look at the description at the very top. There should be a link that you can click on that says send us a text, and you can send us your top stories for the 2026 World Cup there, or any questions or comments you have about the show. But like we said, some of those storylines, we may turn one of those into a future episode on the LGS Pod. And as we always say, if you are free on Tuesday evenings, is usually when we record the show live, you can head on over to our YouTube channel Tuesdays at 6 o'clock and join us in the chat. Dylan, any final comments before we head out this evening?
Yeah, No Shave November this is definitely the bushiest my beard has been in a long time, which is a lot for me, even though it's splotchy as hell, as you can kind of see. But I'm so over this. I'm so very excited to shave this weekend. It's itchy as hell. And like the thing is too, I kind of neurotically like pick at the hairs on my face. Like it's been a neuroses my whole life. Like I used to twirl my hair on my head when I was a kid, like to the
Yeah.
point that I once had to cut out a knot because I twirled it so bad. So it's like an ADHD thing. I can't not pick at it, and it's so bad for my skin. Like it's terrible for my skin because it's all the finger oils and shit getting in there all the time. So I'm very excited to shave. Come what is it? Monday is the end of the month or the start of the next month. So anyway, that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, well, I actually tidied up this morning because I didn't even go the month of November as you did, so I can't even make it that long.
It's fun, but there's a reason the last time I did this was 4 years ago. So
and now probably be 4 or more before the next time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Need to find another way to do the support of these things that's not who just don't like doing the facial hair.
It is fun to just kind of see what happens, but it is quite a nuisance towards the end of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, good luck. Hopefully next time when we see you. Oh, I don't know. Technically, no, we will be December next time.
Yeah, it'll be the
so
second.
Next time you'll be all clean shaven for us. Okay.
5 o'clock shadow probably. I like to do the half on my trimmer. It's like the half millimeter or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, looking forward to seeing that. And for everybody else, thanks for joining us this week on the LGS Pod, and we'll see everyone next week.